Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Albionist, and as you can see from the title of this video, I'm going to be discussing why the regime, so to speak, is actually embracing what has been labelled the populist right, and what the implications of that, the causes of that are. A little bit of a delay as I re-recorded this about 4 times now because I'm a bit of a voice cell, so to speak, and yeah, didn't really want me whining at you for 15 minutes. So tried to make it a little bit more listenable. Yeah. So obviously, for the last few decades now, the sort of so-called political scientists and the sort of nerds in the mainstream media have been to no end speculating and fear-mongering about the dangerous rise of populism. Yes, the greatest threat to liberal democracy and the challenge to an end of history consensus. Obviously, this is a completely imagined threat. The actual populist right, the sort of right that identifies with the white working class, anti-immigration sentiments, is very tame, completely really seeking to play by the rules, really, of liberal democracy instead of having the sort of special privileges the more woke left have been able to get away with. And for that reason, it's all civic nationalism and tax cuts at the end of the day. The Thatcherites of reform, and by no means a threat to the establishment. And yet, it was demonized for so long, and now we see that trend has completely reversed, then very quickly. Most notably, with the recent election of Donald Trump, solid victory, popular votes, every single swing state, a strong mandate. But this election stood out because it's in stark contrast with obviously 2020, in which it was clear that the institutions of power worked very much against him, to say the least. Obviously, all of tech, all of the media, the deep state in the end, and ultimately even the GOP worked to lock Trump out of power, seeking a return to politics as usual. But now this trend actually it's been reversed, and the media this time far less outraged, not frothing at the mouth with sort of hatred for Trump. The TDS, the Trump derangement syndrome, very much dying down. So what is what's the cause? Why this change? And we see this actually not just in America, but across Europe as well. Meloni, Wilders actually allowed in government instead of being the boogeymen on the outside. And even here in the UK, a lot of speculation as of late around Reform Party off the back of the momentum of Trump. Can Farage repeat something similar here in the UK? It's discussed a lot, and given how useless Labour have proven to be and how hated the Tories are, very much a real possibility. But this would have been seen as inconceivable off this time, 3.5 years ago. We're coming off the back of the 2020 presidential election, the seemingly peak woke. So what is the cause for this change? So if you allow me to do my spiel about this sort of so-called overturn window, I believe it's people refer to, which is very controlled and managed, acceptable political dialogue. And really, ultimately, the ideology is secondary to the factions that the ideologies represent. But broadly speaking, you have the sort of regime HQ. They're recognizable through figures like Tony Blair, Hillary Clinton, David Cameron, and Biden pre-dementia. The managerial deep state, so to speak, often referred to as the Z to the O to the G, whose priorities always are American foreign policy, growth of the bureaucracy, and their own power. It should be noted that whilst the individuals within this system may genuinely believe in the ideas which they espouse, the system as a whole is not driven by ideology, but basically driven by results. It wants to maintain power. Which isn't necessarily the case with these other factions we're going to go on to discuss, which is why they're allowed to be so easily controlled by the regime. So the other factions, of course, the regime-friendly left, the progressives, who have been the strongest allies of the regime over the last few years and decades, which is manifested through woke, DEI, BLM, LGBT, all of which sort of very much reached a peak in 2020 and 2021. If you remember, it was insufferable. You couldn't catch a break from any of this stuff. And now they may have fallen out of favor for various reasons we're going to come on to discuss. And another faction, the formerly demonized regime-friendly right, the populists, Trump and Farage, the figures who, yes, they're a lot better, far more preferable even to their regime-friendly left counterparts, or even their regime HQ conservative counterparts. But it should be pointed out that obviously, at the end of the day, these are not real threats to the regime proper. They're actually, almost not of the regime, they are very much allowed by, and in time to time, and as we're going to see, tools of the political establishment, which they claim to be a threat to. Zooming out a little, it should be reminded to all listening that all of those factions listed are very much on the historical radical left. These are destructive ideologues who occupy varying degrees of insanity. Nothing they believe is historically normal for us in the West, and that's what our beliefs on the online right, if you want to call it that, are the historical norm for the West. But why is the political establishment doing this switch? Why make the switch from woke to populist? Why make the change? Why drop the woke? Because up until recently, the regime sided with these progressives. They were the main sort of lackeys of power to push through their agenda. But I think the key reasons I would identify are that the woke is essentially just a slur at this point. It's completely unpopular, deeply hated. Just a meme, really, about anything sort of weaselly, annoying, whiny, overly feminine, and obnoxiously left-wing can be easily labelled now as woke. And, that's got some weight to it. It's a genuinely hated thing. That, in addition to the fact that the progressives don't quite have their priorities in the right order when it comes to, as far as the regime is concerned, when it comes to Middle East, with tensions there. there can be no hesitation over support for Israel. There can be no sympathies for Palestine as far as power is concerned. And so for these reasons, that and the sheer sort of just incompetence of these people, I mean, leftists are genuinely, on another planet in terms of their disconnect to reality. This faction, the progressive faction, is no longer useful for the regime at this current point. And as we see all with Kamala Harris, the DNC tries to kick out Biden and go their own way, and it backfires quite badly for them. But why the shift? Okay, yes, you made the shift away from the woke. Why the shift to the populist right? So I've identified 4 reasons. The mainstream is losing legitimacy. We've seen the Conservative Party, and we've seen the sort of old Bush-era conservatives in the GOP are just not taken seriously. They're a joke. People, their own base, don't like them anymore. They're obvious clowns. People will never vote for in this country. Well, not for the foreseeable future. A David Cameron, at least not enthusiastically. In America, people won't vote for another George or Jeb Bush. These are discredited people. People want something new. In addition, there are new factions at play, new power factions. New people have a seat at the table. Silicon Valley and the tech bros, notably Elon Musk, the most vocal supporter of Trump, it seems, out of any celebrity. And the markets in general seem to think, look, these MAGA guys, these sort of neo-Thatcherites in their economics, these shrink the state, slow illegal immigration, bring a bit of law and order back in, bring some common sense back to politics sort of guys. They've got it. They've got it right. Let's side with them. Thirdly, they need to bring conservatives and people of the right, even in the very safe right, back into the fold, or they will cease to be, safely in this sort of contained zone. If people genuinely believe the game is going to screw them and that they never can win whilst playing it, they will not play it. But, consider the lottery. People will give ridiculous amounts of money and keep on doing so their whole lives if they believe that it's just a chance. If you got your guy in there, you'll keep fighting. And maybe every now and so often you get a half win, a compromise, something, a safer victory that doesn't actually harm the regime in the long run, or the left in the long run. So conservatives can be brought back into the fold at minimal cost through the populists. And you can see that already. The sort of MAGA crowd is already sort of clapping like happy seals for joy over this victory, and will probably just defend anything Trump does, even if it doesn't really give them the results they want. And fourthly, power projection abroad. With tensions with Russia, Iran, China, which are obviously making the American foreign policy priorities a little bit more uneasy. Obviously, causing some concern amongst the Pentagon. Power projection abroad is a big thing, and having unserious clowns like Kamala Harris in the White House is just not going to work for them in the long run. I mean, it was a joke during the election campaign, if you remember, when Kamala was interviewed about the message she would send to Iran, and she said, don't. It was just ridiculous. It was not intimidating anyone. I don't think a 6-year-old boy who'd been naughty would be intimidated by their teacher if she said that to him. I mean, it's this. They're unserious, they're ridiculous, and Trump is unpredictable and chaotic and a bit of a strong man, and that it does achieve their goals in that sense. So overall, Trump, Farage, and the other populist rightists like them, people of that yoke, are currently much safer bet for the regime than the unhinged leftist counterparts. And look, even though they may not have preferred Trump to Harris, deep down in their ideological core, it's about what gets results. It's about what gets results at the end of the day. And they've got to make their money. They've got to keep their power. They've got to secure their priorities. And if that means Trump's their best bet, they're going to do it. Now, whether or not this is a win or loss for us is something that needs discussion, because people come into sort of one of two views on this, where they'll say, well, look, no, they'll bury their head in the sand. They'll say, look, Trump is a massive win. He can't do any wrong. He's our guy. We're entering based world now. And they get ahead of themselves, because Trump is not going to bring about based world. Even if he wanted to, he couldn't. And he doesn't want to. He's quite happy to sort of return to a slightly older liberal democratic consensus, with a bit less woke stuff and a bit less illegal immigration. And look, that's a good thing, certainly a good thing, but it's not a win, and it's a temporary win. That very quickly we'll be back in the same position. And it is containment. It does stop what could be genuine, real threats to the regime from emerging. Now, that said, people on the other hand will blackpill and say, nothing is gained from this. It's a waste of time. Trump's a traitor. Trump's a sort of Israel stooge. Trump's betrayed his voters. Or even that the MAGA movement itself and the voters themselves are all idiots and clowns, want nothing to do with it. Enlightened Bidenism, whatever crap Richard Spencer wants to come up with, But that's not entirely true. There are real gains to be made in this situation. And as a general rule, things getting better can be seen, oddly enough, by people on the right, people on the online right, as a bad thing. We think we need this destabilization, we need the regime on the ropes, we need them desperate, and then we can get a new right to rise up and take power. But as it happens, if there was a breakdown, complete destabilization, some sort of collapse that could be brought about by Kamala Harris or by the regime failing to bring the conservatives back into the fold, or failing to keep stability abroad, or whatever happening you care to mention, we would be completely unable to capitalize on that at this current point, and would probably just result in the regime doubling down, going sort of ultra-Maoist. Things can always get worse, and as it happens, things getting better buys us time and allows us to, there are genuinely people in the Trump administration who will align much closer with us, if not directly, entirely with us, or at least with fractions of us. And that means that this is a big opportunity. Yes, all the progress made here is inherently limited, and we're essentially powerless and can be dropped as soon as you become a nuisance. But we've got no choice other than to squeeze as many victories out of this period as we possibly can, and accept they're going to be limited, they're going to be temporary, and that we're in a pretty compromised position. And we probably will be for a very long time to come. But if we can get W's, if we can get wins, if we can get some of those things that Trump is promising that are very genuinely optimistic and I think have been influenced by the online right, it's progress. Even if it's very, very small and in a very, very regime-friendly way. So thanks for listening. If you could endure the whole thing. Again, I'm not going to upload regularly. I'm too lazy for that. And, like, subscribe, whatever other stuff that helps the algorithm do it. And see you all in the next video.